In the fall of 1986, on a quiet stretch of American highway, something unbelievable happened. A brand new Chevrolet Corvette pulled up beside what looked like an ordinary black Buick Regal. No giant hood scoop, no racing stripes, no screaming V8 rumble, just a sinister black coupe with dark wheels and a small chrome badge that almost nobody noticed. The light turned green. The Corvette driver smiled. A few seconds later, all he could see were the taillights of a Buick disappearing into the distance. Most people have no idea why that happened, because the real story of the Buick Grand National isn't about horsepower. It isn't even about turbochargers. It's about how one small V6 embarrassed nearly every V8 in America and scared General Motors so badly that they quietly killed it. But what almost nobody knows is that the Grand National was never supposed to become a legend. It started as an experiment, one that nearly failed before it rewrote muscle car history. To understand why this black Buick shocked the automotive world, you have to go back to the late 1970s. America's muscle car era was dying. The oil crisis had changed everything. Insurance premiums for high-performance cars were skyrocketing. The Clean Air Act forced manufacturers to slash compression ratios and choke engines with emissions equipment. Legendary V8s that once produced well over 400 horsepower were now struggling to make 180. Even icons like the Chevrolet Camaro Z28 and Pontiac Trans Am had lost much of their bite. The Dodge Charger had been reduced to a family sedan. The Plymouth Roadrunner was a shadow of its former glory. Oldsmobile's 442 produced barely 170 horsepower. For enthusiasts, it felt like the golden age was over. Permanently. High school parking lots that once thundered with big block V8s now filled with Econoboxes and front-wheel drive compacts. Drag strips saw fewer participants every year. Magazine editors wrote eulogies for American performance. The entire automotive landscape had fundamentally shifted, and nobody seemed to know how to bring excitement back. General Motors needed something different. Not another giant V8, something smarter. At the same time, engineers had begun paying attention to an idea that European manufacturers were exploring more seriously: turbocharging. Instead of building a bigger engine, why not force more air into a smaller one? More oxygen meant more fuel. More fuel meant more power. On paper, it sounded brilliant. In reality, early turbo engines were nightmares. Turbo lag was enormous. Reliability was questionable. Heat destroyed components. Detonation could destroy pistons within seconds. Seals leaked. Turbos failed catastrophically. Drivers complained about unpredictable power delivery that felt like an on-off switch rather than smooth acceleration. The Chevrolet Corvair Monza and several Oldsmobile models had experimented with turbocharging in the 1960s. Most attempts ended badly. Consumer trust in forced induction remained extremely low throughout the 1970s, but Buick engineers refused to give up. Their foundation was a humble 90-degree V6 that originally displaced 231 cubic inches, or 3.8 liters. It featured a bore of 3.80 inches and a stroke of 3.40 inches, dimensions that gave it surprisingly strong low-end torque. Unlike many performance engines of the era, compression was kept relatively modest at around 8.01, allowing higher boost pressures without catastrophic detonation. That decision would change everything. The engine itself had interesting origins. Buick originally designed it in the early 1960s, then sold the tooling to Kaiser Jeep. Years later, when fuel economy became critical, GM purchased the design back. Nobody imagined this economy engine would eventually humiliate America's greatest V8s. But there was one enormous problem. Nobody respected a V6. In America, performance meant 8 cylinders. 6 cylinders belonged in economy cars, minivans, rental fleets. Convincing buyers otherwise seemed impossible. Walk into any American bar in 1980 and suggest that a V6 could outrun a V8, and you'd be laughed out the door. Muscle car culture had spent decades worshipping displacement. Bigger was always better. The formula was simple. Cubic inches equaled horsepower, and horsepower equaled respect. Buick was challenging sacred ground. Then came an opportunity nobody expected. In 1981, NASCAR created a special race called the Winston Cup Grand National event. Buick released a limited appearance package honoring its participation. The package itself wasn't particularly fast, but the name stuck, Grand National. It sounded serious, aggressive, almost intimidating, and Buick realized they had something special. The early Grand Nationals were essentially appearance packages: gray paint, stripes, special wheels, marketing material that promised performance without actually delivering much. Only 215 were produced in 1982. The program almost died before it truly began, but engineers kept working, kept refining, kept believing. By 1984, the Grand National finally received the turbocharged, intercooled philosophy that engineers had been refining. Early versions produced around 200 horsepower and roughly 300 pound-feet of torque. Those numbers didn't sound revolutionary until you looked at where that torque arrived. The turbocharged V6 delivered brutal mid-range acceleration, while many naturally aspirated V8s needed high RPM to wake up. The Buick simply shoved you back into the seat the moment boost arrived. Peak torque came at just 2,400 RPM, meaning instant response exactly where street driving happened most. People weren't prepared for it. Stoplight encounters became legendary. Mustang drivers expected an easy victory. Camaro owners anticipated dominance. Instead, they watched a family sedan vanish into the distance while their tachometers climbed desperately through the power band. And then, the real nightmare started for Buick's competitors. Engineers kept improving every weak point. The Garrett turbocharger became more responsive. Fuel delivery became more precise. Electronic spark control allowed the computer to manage timing with impressive sophistication for the era. Sequential fuel injection wasn't yet common in American cars. The Grand National used a sophisticated throttle body injection system that could respond to boost pressure, throttle position, and engine temperature simultaneously. For the mid-1980s, this represented cutting-edge technology. Most importantly, Buick introduced a highly efficient air-to-air intercooler for the 1986 model year. That single addition transformed the engine. Cooling compressed intake air dramatically increased density while reducing knock. More boost became possible without sacrificing reliability. Intake temperatures dropped by over 100 degrees Fahrenheit under hard acceleration, allowing engineers to safely increase boost pressure without destroying pistons. Horsepower climbed to an officially advertised 235 horsepower. Torque reached 330 pound-feet. Those figures sounded respectable, but many insiders believed Buick intentionally underrated the engine. Independent dyno testing and quarter-mile performance suggested the actual output was much closer to 260 horsepower, with some tests indicating even higher numbers. Rear-wheel dyno tests frequently showed 210 to 220 horsepower reaching the ground, which meant the engine produced significantly more at the crank after accounting for drivetrain losses. Why would Buick understate its own performance? Because inside General Motors, politics mattered. The Chevrolet Corvette represented GM's performance crown jewel. The Grand National was quietly becoming faster. You can probably guess what happened next, but the truth is even crazier. The standard 1986 Corvette's 5.7-liter L98 V8 produced 230 horsepower and 330 pound-feet of torque. Nearly identical torque, less real-world acceleration. Despite having only 6 cylinders and a smaller displacement, the Buick repeatedly outran America's flagship sports car in magazine testing. Car and driver recorded quarter-mile times in the low 13-second range for the Grand National under ideal conditions. Independent owners frequently dipped into the high 12s with nothing more than sticky tires and increased boost pressure. The Corvette often struggled to keep up. Motor Trend published comparison tests that embarrassed Chevrolet's engineering division. Road and Track questioned how a Buick sedan could outperform a purpose-built sports car. Enthusiast magazines couldn't stop talking about the black Buick that rewrote performance expectations. The Ford Mustang GT's 5.0-liter V8? Behind. The Chevrolet Camaro IROC-Z? Behind. The Pontiac Trans Am? Behind. Even many big block classics found themselves unexpectedly challenged thanks to the Buick's massive turbo torque. Street racers couldn't believe what they were seeing, neither could GM executives. Underground racing culture embraced the Grand National immediately. Its sleeper appearance became legendary. Unlike brightly colored Camaros or loud Mustangs, the all-black Buick looked innocuous. Unsuspecting victims never saw it coming. By the time they realized what they were racing, the competition was already over. Mechanics began noticing something fascinating. Unlike many high-strung performance engines, the Buick's bottom end was remarkably durable. Its cast-iron block was incredibly stout. The crankshaft could tolerate significant boost. The connecting rods, while not exotic, were surprisingly robust. Owners discovered that simple modifications could unlock astonishing performance. Increase boost from roughly 15 psi to around 18 or 20. Install a freer-flowing exhaust. Upgrade the fuel pump. Retune the chip-controlling ignition and fuel. Suddenly, horsepower climbed beyond 320. Many modified cars exceeded 400 horsepower without opening the engine. Some racers eventually pushed stock blocks beyond 500 horsepower. A few extreme builds approached 600 horsepower on factory internals before components finally surrendered. That wasn't supposed to happen. Engineers never designed this engine for such abuse. Yet the overbuilt construction meant for durability and longevity accidentally created one of the most modification-friendly platforms in automotive history. The aftermarket exploded with upgrades. Companies developed larger turbos, improved intercoolers, stronger transmissions, and performance chips that unlocked previously unimaginable power. Drag racers discovered they could build 9-second quarter-mile cars using modified Grand National engines. 9 seconds. From a V6. From a Buick. But there was still one final evolution waiting, and it would become the most feared Buick ever built. In 1987, Buick partnered with ASC and McLaren Technologies to create something extraordinary, the GNX. Officially, only 547 examples were produced. Everything about it was engineered to maximize the Grand National formula: a larger Garrett T3 turbocharger, a less restrictive ceramic-coated exhaust, improved intercooling, unique engine calibration, special rear suspension with a torque arm design, reducing axle hop, functional fender vents, exclusive Stewart Warner gauges, unique mesh wheels, special VIN sequence, numbered dash plaques. The official rating: 276 horsepower, 360 pound-feet of torque. Almost nobody believed those numbers. Road tests consistently suggested real output exceeded 300 horsepower, with some estimates approaching 320. The GNX felt significantly more powerful than the standard Grand National, and acceleration times proved the official numbers were conservative at best. Car and driver recorded 0 to 60 in approximately 4.7 seconds. The quarter mile disappeared in around 13.5 seconds at over 102 miles per hour. For 1987, those numbers were outrageous. Ferrari's 328 GTAs managed 0 to 60 in roughly 5.5 seconds. Porsche's 911 Carrera needed about 5.3 seconds. The Lamborghini Jalpa took approximately 6.0 seconds. Meanwhile, a four-door Buick sedan was running with exotic European supercars that cost 3 times as much. Even Ferrari owners were paying attention. The GNX cost around $29,900. That's over twice the price of many family sedans at the time. Yet every single one sold almost immediately. Collectors recognized they were witnessing history. Dealerships added markups. Wealthy enthusiasts paid premiums. Some buyers purchased multiple examples, correctly predicting future value. A few GNX models never accumulated significant mileage, locked away in climate-controlled garages as investments rather than driven machines. But success created a dangerous problem. General Motors suddenly had a Buick outperforming Chevrolet's Halo car. Internal politics became impossible to ignore. Engineers reportedly joked that every time the Grand National became faster, somebody upstairs became more uncomfortable. Whether every story is true or not, one fact remains undeniable. The Grand National disappeared immediately after the 1987 model year. Why? Several reasons collided at once. The Regal platform was ending production. Front-wheel drive architecture had become GM's corporate priority. New emissions regulations demanded cleaner engines. Insurance companies still viewed high-performance cars with suspicion. And inside GM, maintaining clear brand hierarchy mattered. Buick was supposed to sell comfort and luxury to retirees. Chevrolet was supposed to represent performance. Pontiac was supposed to deliver excitement. The Grand National violated those carefully maintained boundaries. Officially, the Grand National simply reached the end of its production cycle. Unofficially, many enthusiasts believe GM wasn't eager to let Buick keep humiliating the Corvette. Was that the only reason? Probably not, but it certainly didn't help. Even after production stopped, the legend only grew. Street racers hunted them. Tuners discovered their incredible potential. Magazine covers called them giant killers. Values initially depreciated like any used car, then stabilized, then began climbing. By the late 1990s, collectors recognized what they represented. By the 2000s, pristine examples commanded serious premiums. Today, the Grand National market remains incredibly strong. Unlike many muscle cars that relied purely on displacement, the Buick represented something entirely different. It proved intelligence could beat size. Instead of adding 2 more cylinders, engineers optimized airflow. Instead of increasing displacement, they increased boost. Instead of chasing peak horsepower, they focused on torque exactly where drivers used it most. Instead of following tradition, they challenged everything American performance culture believed. That philosophy became the blueprint for modern performance. Today, Ford's EcoBoost engines, BMW's turbocharged straight sixes, Mercedes-AMG's Turbo V8S, and even Chevrolet's latest turbocharged power plants all follow the same fundamental principle. Smaller engine, forced induction, maximum efficiency, maximum performance. The Grand National showed America that formula decades before it became industry standard. Modern muscle cars like the Ford Mustang EcoBoost produce over 300 horsepower from just 2.3 liters and 4 cylinders. The current BMW M2 generates 453 horsepower from a turbocharged inline-6. Mercedes-AMG's 2.0-liter 4-cylinder creates 416 horsepower in the A45S. These achievements trace their philosophical lineage directly back to what Buick proved possible in the 1980s. Today, original Grand Nationals command serious money. Well-preserved examples regularly sell for well over $70,000. Exceptional GNXs have crossed auction blocks for more than $200,000, with the finest low-mileage cars bringing substantially higher prices. Not because they're the rarest muscle cars, not because they're the loudest, but because they changed how enthusiasts thought about performance forever. Ironically, the engine that embarrassed America's V8 establishment wasn't particularly exotic. It remained a cast-iron pushrod V6 with 2 valves per cylinder, no dual overhead cams, no exotic aluminum construction, no complicated variable valve timing, no fancy titanium components, just 231 cubic inches, a strong turbocharger, smart engineering, and a team willing to challenge decades of conventional wisdom. The same basic architecture that powered millions of ordinary Buick sedans. That's why the Grand National still fascinates enthusiasts nearly 40 years later. It wasn't supposed to win. It wasn't supposed to outperform Corvettes. It wasn't supposed to embarrass Ferraris. It definitely wasn't supposed to become one of the greatest American performance cars ever built. But it did. Because sometimes the biggest revolution doesn't come from adding more cylinders. Sometimes it comes from making every single one work harder than anyone thought possible. Sometimes it comes from a team of engineers who refused to accept that performance required 8 cylinders and 400 cubic inches. Sometimes it comes from proving that intelligence, creativity, and determination matter more than tradition. And that's the shocking reason Buick's Grand National V6 embarrassed nearly every V8 in America. It proved that raw displacement wasn't the future. Engineering was. The little turbocharged V6 didn't just rewrite the rules of the muscle car era. It quietly predicted the performance philosophy that dominates the automotive world today. The Grand National proved that American ingenuity hadn't died with the muscle car era. It had simply evolved, and that evolution wore sinister black paint, rolled on dark wheels, and carried a small chrome badge that changed everything. If you enjoyed this story, let me know in the comments which forgotten engine or legendary rivalry you'd like to see next. And don't forget to subscribe, because there are plenty more hidden stories from automotive history waiting to be uncovered.